Hi, I'm Selene. My sister once asked to borrow the cabin I bought with my own money, for her kids, she said, for a little piece. What she didn't say? She'd already been renting it out behind my back, and when I said no, her husband broke the gate open with a power tool. My parents begged me to let it go. We're family, they said. But here's the truth. Sometimes the people who share your last name are the ones who will rob you blind with a smile. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever had to cut off your own family just to protect your peace? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone, because what happened next, no one saw coming. It was the kind of October day North Carolina does best. Just chilly enough to wear a flannel, but not so cold you couldn't sit outside with a glass of sweet tea. Marlo and I had barely stepped out of the car when I spotted Callista, already holding court near the grill, her voice carrying over the soft hum of the family gathering. Dad was hunched over the barbecue like it held national secrets, while Mom flitted between guests with that rehearsed smile she wore like armor. "Celine!" Callista called, arms wide, smile tight. "You brought the mountain girl back to civilization." I gave her a nod and a hug that ended half a second too soon. Marlo, as always, offered a polite handshake to my father and helped carry in the pie I made. I glanced around the backyard, folding tables lined with disposable tablecloths, plastic trays of store-bought cookies. The same setup since I was 13. We hadn't even set our plates down before Callista launched her first jab. "So how's the cabin? Still pretending it's a luxury resort when it's basically a glorified shed in the woods?" There it was, same old Callista. My jaw tensed, but I smiled. "It's good. Quiet." "Must be nice," she said, sipping her soda, "having a whole house just sit there while the rest of us hustle." I didn't respond. Instead, I reached into my purse and fingered the old brass keyring, the one engraved with the words, "For family." I had it made the day I signed the deed. Back then, I thought buying the cabin near Boone was a gesture of love, a way to offer Mom and Dad an escape from the city, a place for holidays, for healing, for memories. Now, Callista called it a spare guest house. At lunch, we sat around the picnic table. Marlo made small talk with my brother-in-law, Jet, who never looked me in the eye unless he needed something. I kept my smile polite and my fork moving. Then, mid-bite, Callista leaned in with a syrupy voice that meant nothing good. "You know," she said, "I was thinking, Jet and I could rent out the cabin on weekends, Airbnb style. It's just sitting there." I froze, then looked to Mom. She was busy tearing napkins into tiny squares. Dad pretended to be deeply invested in the meat thermometer. I blinked. "That's not what it's for." Callista tilted her head like she didn't hear me. "It's perfect for short stays. We could split the profits. I already took some pictures during our last visit." "That's not what it's for," I repeated, a little firmer. "It was a gift." Callista rolled her eyes. "A gift no one's using. Might as well make it useful." My chest tightened, but I smiled like I always did, a habit of survival. It was easier than explaining that the cabin had been my anchor during the divorce, my escape during the layoffs, my one sacred thing that didn't ask anything in return. Later that afternoon, while packing up leftovers, I stepped into the hallway to grab my sweater. That's when I heard her. Callista somewhere behind the kitchen wall telling Jet, "It's always been like this. She hoards. We hustle." I didn't say anything. I didn't move. Just let the words sink into the cracks they always found. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was the certainty in her voice, like this version of me had always existed in her mind. I left early, told everyone I was just tired. In the car, Marlo drove in silence. He knew better than to ask. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the keyring. The brass tag caught the fading light. For family. And for the first time, it felt like a lie. 2 nights later, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling as the shadows from the porch lights danced on our bedroom wall. Marlo was breathing steady beside me, long gone to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again. Callista, laughing, calling the cabin a glorified shed, brushing off years of sacrifice with a smile and a snide remark. "You don't even use it." The words looped like a bad commercial. It wasn't just rude, it was ignorant. She didn't know, or maybe she chose not to remember. I turned onto my side and looked toward my dresser. There, nestled in a dish beside my wedding ring and the earrings I always forget to wear, sat the brass key ring. For family. I had read those words so many times they no longer looked like language, just etched metal, just a story I had once told myself. My mind wandered to the fall 5 years ago when I bought the cabin. I had just sold my condo in Charlotte, a place I'd worked 2 jobs to afford, and poured every cent into a little A-frame nestled in the Blue Ridge. I didn't buy it for myself. Not really. I dreamed of surprising Mom and Dad with a retirement haven. A quiet place to get away from everything. No mortgage, no stress. I still remember the day I handed them the keys. We were all standing on the porch. Callista was late, as always, and my mother had slipped a small wooden tag onto the ring. She had burned the words in herself, a sweet gesture. For family. That tag had meant something then. It had felt like a ribbon tying us all together. But even back then, Mom had said, "Maybe don't make it official, Celine. You know how Callista gets." I was too naive, or maybe just too hopeful to protest, so I kept my name off the mailbox, off the utility bills, even off the property deed. It was a gift, I said, no strings, just love. And now, that love was being treated like a public storage unit up for grabs. The next morning, I was dragging myself into the kitchen, still in my robe, when Marlowe slid his phone across the counter to me. "Celine, I think you should hear this." I raised a brow. "What is it?" He tapped play. At first, it was just background noise, muffled traffic, someone laughing too loudly. Then I recognized Callista's voice, clear and sharp like ice cracking on pavement. "She's always been like this," she was saying. "Thinks if she pays for something, it makes her queen. It's a cabin. It's not Fort Knox." Another voice chimed in. "Narina." "Well, if she's not gonna share it, what's the point of calling it a family place?" Callista snorted. "Honestly, we just need the key. Then what's she gonna do? Sue us? She's too soft for that. Always has been." Then laughter. Full-bodied, careless laughter like nothing they said mattered. I stood there, frozen, as if the linoleum under my feet had turned to ice. Marlowe stayed quiet, letting the silence wrap itself around us both. "How'd you get that?" I finally asked. "Callista butt-dialed me," he said. "She didn't know it recorded." I clenched the edge of the counter. My hands were cold, my stomach twisted. It wasn't just that they didn't appreciate what I gave, they didn't even respect me enough to lie behind my back gently. I walked back to the bedroom, sat down on the edge of the bed and picked up the keyring. For family. It didn't say for Callista, it didn't say for Narina, it said for family. But what is family when they take without asking? When they plan to steal and still expect your smile? That evening, I watched the sun slide down over the hills behind our backyard. The leaves were starting to brown, but the air hadn't turned bitter just yet. Neither had I, but I could feel the edge coming. If they wanted to cross a line, they needed to know. There was one. By the following Sunday, I had rehearsed a dozen versions of how that brunch might go. Marlowe didn't say much as we drove to my parents' house, just kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near mine. I didn't take it. I needed both palms free, to brace for impact. Their house looked exactly the same as always. White siding, trimmed hedges, flag in the front yard, bird feeder swaying. The kind of place that made you think nothing bad could ever happen here. But I knew better. Inside, the scent of bacon and coffee hung heavy. Mom was already plating biscuits, smiling like we were all just another happy American family on a weekend get-together. Callista and Narina weren't there. "Girls' weekend," Mom said as she kissed my cheek. I just nodded. We ate at the kitchen table like we always did. Tight quarters, floral tablecloth, mismatched mugs from every state fair or gas station they'd ever driven through. "So," Mom said casually as she passed the butter, "your sister asked about using the cabin next month, just for a weekend getaway." I looked up from my plate. She texted me, she added quickly. I didn't say yes, just thought I'd check with you first. Dad sipped his coffee, eyes fixed on the backyard through the window. Didn't say a word. I set my fork down and said, without raising my voice, "Do they think it belongs to you?" Silence. Mom looked at me like I'd asked if the sky was green. Well, she said slowly, we never exactly corrected them. Why? She shrugged. It was easier. Easier for who? She didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair. You know they plan to go behind my back, right? Still no response. Do they even know I bought it? Another pause. Dad cleared his throat. We didn't think it mattered. That was rich. I looked at both of them, wondering how people who taught me to tell the truth could hide behind so many of their own, and then, like a movie reel unspooling in my head, I saw it again, the day I handed them the keys. 5 years ago, the porch was damp from rain, the scent of pine and cedar still fresh from new construction. I remember Mom's tears, her smile as she held up the wooden tag. For family. You should put it in your name, I'd said. No, she replied. Let them think it's ours. Easier that way. You don't need credit for everything. I had agreed. I thought I was being generous, mature. Turns out I was just erasing myself. Back in the kitchen, I asked, have Callista or Narina ever paid a cent toward the cabin? Mom blinked. Well, no, but have they helped with maintenance? Property taxes? Anything? Dad shifted in his seat. No, you've covered everything. Everything. Every bill, every repair, every drive up there in winter with flashlights and tools because the power went out. Every dollar spent furnishing the place with care. And now they were treating it like an Airbnb waiting to be exploited. I stood up, pushed the chair in slowly. Then from now on, I said, each word like a brick being laid, they don't set foot there without my say-so. Mom's eyes widened. Celine, I'm not asking, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Sometimes the quietest voice is the one that shakes the table. I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door. No hugs, no thank yous. My father didn't stop me when I walked out, and that told me everything. I didn't sleep much that night. After leaving my parents' house, I drove in silence with the window cracked open, the October wind slicing through my coat and my thoughts. Marlowe offered to talk, but I told him I just needed quiet, and he respected that. I sat on the edge of our bed long after midnight, staring at the key tag resting in my hand like a relic from a different lifetime. The next morning, I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. It was Tom, the handyman my parents had known for years. He'd fixed everything from broken porch lights to leaky pipes at the cabin. Hey, Celine, he said, his voice friendly but cautious. Didn't mean to bug you, just figured I'd let you know. I swung by the cabin this weekend. One of the neighbors thought they saw someone there, so I stopped in just to check. My heart tightened. There were tire marks in the gravel and a few soda cans in the trash outside, he continued. Place looked fine, just strange. I stood still, the laundry forgotten in my hands. Strange how? I asked. Well, he said, I spoke with a couple from out of town. They were just packing up when I got there. Said they were friends of Callista. Told me they'd rented the place through the family. I didn't say anything. Tom paused, then added, thought maybe y'all set something up, but then I looked into the tax file again. You're still the owner on record. He trailed off, letting the silence fill in the rest. I thanked him and hung up. For a moment, I just stood there in the hallway. The dryer hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. But everything else in me went cold. I grabbed my laptop, pulled up the cabin's smart lock account. There they were, multiple entries from Friday through Sunday. None from me. None from my parents either. Next, I searched every short-term rental site I could think of. It took less than 5 minutes to find it. The photos were blurry, the listing name generic, mountain getaway retreat, but I knew those rooms. I picked out the bookshelf I built myself, the coffee table I'd sanded down, the deck furniture I drove 6 hours to assemble. Marlowe came in, saw the screen, and leaned over my shoulder. You've got to be kidding. I clicked on the host info. It was a scrambled email, a throwaway address, but I recognized the handle. It was Jet's, Callista's husband. Marlowe didn't even need to ask. He opened a shared drive, started taking screenshots, saving everything: dates, calendar availability, booking terms, everything. I called my parents right after. Mom answered first. "I need you to listen to me," I said. "Someone rented out the cabin, without my knowledge. Strangers were inside my home this weekend." She gasped audibly. "What? Who? How?" "Tom saw them. They said they were friends of Callista. The place was listed online under Jet's email." The line went quiet. Then I heard Dad pick up. "Is this true?" he asked softly. "I have proof," I said. "The lock records, the listing. I'm sending it to you now." Another long pause. Then, in a tone that sounded smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he said, "I'm so sorry, Celine. No excuses, no deflection. Just sorry." I nodded, though they couldn't see me. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone for a long while. Then I opened a new message and typed, "To Callista, Narina. I know. Remove the listing. Never access that property again. This is your only warning." I hit send. No reply. 10 minutes. 15. 20. I refreshed the listing, and it was gone. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe easier, because I knew it wasn't guilt. It was fear. I was watering the fern on my front porch when I saw her SUV pull up. Callista stepped out in heels too high for my gravel driveway, balancing a tray of pastries in one hand and 2 coffees in the other. Her face held a practiced smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. I stood frozen for a second, hose still running in my hand. I hadn't seen or heard from her since the listing vanished. No apology, no explanation. She called out, "Chipper. Hey, thought I'd drop by. Peace offering?" She held the tray higher like it was a magic spell that might soften me. I wanted to turn around and walk back inside, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe anger, kept me rooted. I turned the hose off, wiped my hands on my jeans, and opened the screen door without a word. She followed me up the steps, carefully placing the tray on the side table like it was some sacred ritual. "Pumpkin muffins. From that bakery you like. Remember?" she said, voice light, almost too light. I didn't offer her a seat. She took one anyway. I stayed standing. "Can we talk business?" she asked, unwrapping one of the muffins like we were about to have brunch on neutral ground. My silence was permission enough, apparently, because she jumped right in. "I've been thinking," she began. "There's no reason that place should sit empty all year. You've got something valuable, Celine. People would kill to rent a cabin like that. I already have a system in place, connections, a whole following. I know what I'm doing." She spoke fast, as if she were rehearsing a pitch. "It'd be a real waste not to use the cabin as a source of income. I mean, it's just sitting there, and honestly, you're kind of emotionally attached." "I get it, but that's not a business mindset." I didn't respond. Not yet. She took that as encouragement. "We could split it. I'd handle the bookings, maintenance, everything. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. We'd both win." "You mean like you've already been doing?" I asked, my voice low. She hesitated, then, with a half smirk, shrugged. "We all do what we need to for our families." It hit wrong, every word. Then she leaned in, voice softening into something that almost resembled concern. "Look, you don't even have kids. This could help with my boys, their education, their future." I let that sink in for a moment, the audacity, the implication, the assumption that my child-free life meant my resources were fair game. "You're right," I said finally. "I don't have kids." She blinked. "And I didn't build that place so you could exploit it." Her smile vanished. "I gave that cabin to Mom and Dad out of love. You took it and tried to turn it into a business without even asking. And now you're here asking me to make it official?" "I'm trying to include you." "No," I interrupted. "You're trying to legitimize what you already did behind my back. That's not inclusion. That's damage control." Callista's face shifted, No longer sweet, no longer smooth, just sharp. You'd really let your nephews miss out on opportunities? You'd punish them because of some pride? I didn't waver. They have a mother. Let her make better choices. Her eyes narrowed. You always thought you were better than us. No, I said, voice steady. I just finally realized I don't have to keep proving I'm family by letting you walk all over me. She didn't respond right away, just stared at me like she was trying to read a language she never bothered to learn. Then she stood up, leaving her untouched coffee on the table. She didn't say goodbye. She left without finishing her coffee, and without the keys she came to get. 2 days later, Saturday night, I finally let myself relax. Marlo and I were having dinner at a quiet place just off Main Street. Nothing fancy, just a booth in the back and a basket of warm cornbread between us. The kind of silence that settles when you've said all you needed to earlier in the day. Then my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, until I saw the notification, driveway motion detected, Blue Ridge Cabin. I tapped the screen, jaw tightening. The live feed loaded in seconds, and there they were, 2 dark figures hunched at the gate. Even in the grainy evening light I recognized Jet, and beside him, Narina's husband, Russ, crouched low with what looked like a grinder. I stopped chewing. Marlo, I whispered, holding out the phone. They're cutting the lock. He didn't say a word, just snatched the phone and pulled his own from his jacket. I heard him telling the dispatcher, clear and precise, 2 men attempting illegal entry at a private residence. We have them on security cam right now. The video crackled slightly. Sparks flew. The chain lock gave way. Jet kicked the gate open like it owed him something. I sat frozen. This wasn't arrogance. It was invasion. They walked straight to the front porch, tried the keypad. When that didn't work, they circled around, out of view, and the next alert showed basement motion. The secondary camera flickered on just in time to catch them prying open the old storm hatch. I reinforced that after the last inspection, I muttered. How did they even... They don't care, Celine, Marlo said. They think they're untouchable. We didn't have to wait long. 15 minutes later, while we were still in the car headed home, another alert came through. Law enforcement present, Blue Ridge Cabin. David, our new property manager, had seen the camera alerts too. He'd already called the sheriff's office, just minutes ahead of us. When I called him, he sounded steady. Calm, even. They're in cuffs, he said. One of them got mouthy. Jet, I think, screaming something about being set up by his own family. I didn't reply. I couldn't. An hour later, my phone lit up again, this time from the sheriff's office directly. Formal charges had been filed: trespassing, property damage, attempted forced entry. I stared out the window as Marlo drove us home in silence. The trees along the highway blurred in the darkness, their branches swaying like shadows shaking their heads. Back home, I poured a glass of water I didn't drink and sat on the couch I no longer found comfortable. The phone rang again. My parents. I let it go to voicemail the first time. The second time I picked up. My mother's voice was already halfway to a sob. We just heard. The sheriff called. Celine, please. We didn't know they were going to do this. Can't we just handle this as a family? I didn't answer right away. I let the words hang, cold and hollow between us. Then I said slowly, You should have thought of that before they broke in. Dad came on the line next. It's gone too far, honey. These boys, Jet and Russ, they made a mistake. But family forgives, don't they? I stared down at the key tag still sitting in the little ceramic bowl by the door. The same tag I had once proudly engraved, For Family. I rose, walked to my laptop, logged into the smart system for the cabin. One by one, I removed every access code. Jet, Russ, Narina, Callista, and finally, Mom and Dad. Marlo watched from the hallway. He didn't ask why. He knew. I saved the changes and shut the laptop. It wasn't about punishment, not anymore. It was about protection. Not because I didn't love them, but because I needed to know who I was protecting it from. The lock held longer than I did, but in the end we both gave out. Monday morning came with the kind of grayness that settles in your bones before you even pour the coffee. The wind had shifted, sharper now, biting through my sweatshirt as I stepped outside to grab the newspaper from the driveway, but it wasn't the newspaper that caught my eye. A plain manila envelope sat neatly against the storm door, sealed, formal, hand-delivered by courier. No return address, just my name, in typed black ink. I brought it inside, placed it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the kettle whined behind me. It wasn't dread I felt. It wasn't even fear. It was the slow, tightening clarity of knowing exactly what was inside, before I even touched it. I peeled it open, careful not to tear the corners, as if doing so might keep the contents from cutting deeper. Typed on letterhead I didn't recognize, the first line made my eyes narrow. On behalf of our clients, Mr. Jet Fennick and Mr. Russell Ames, we formally submit this correspondence regarding the incident dated last Saturday. It went downhill from there. They referred to the break-in as a misunderstanding and proposed I drop all charges in exchange for a gesture of goodwill, a check for $3,000. Enough to patch drywall, repaint a doorframe, maybe fix the latch they broke. But it was the last paragraph that sealed the rage behind my teeth. We are concerned about the ongoing narrative surrounding this matter, including public statements which could result in undue harm to our clients' reputations and that of your extended family. We hope to resolve this discreetly and peacefully. Reputation. That was the leverage they thought they had. I folded the letter back neatly and slid it into a folder. I didn't want Marlo reading it. Not yet. I needed to handle this before I let the venom take root again. By 10, I was sitting in my attorney's office across from a man named Caden Doyle. He looked like someone who had seen every kind of betrayal dressed in every type of handshake. He didn't blink twice at the letter. "They're trying to scare you with soft threats," he said, flipping the pages. "Typical bluff, empty but loud." I nodded. "So we hit back?" "We respond, not with emotion, with law." He listed off each point like a checklist he'd done 100 times. Full reimbursement for all property damage, a notarized written apology from both men, legally binding agreement of no further contact, no trespass order filed with the county, coverage of all your legal fees, and if they decline. He smiled. "We file civil suit, defamation, trespass, damages. Their little gesture of goodwill won't even cover the filing fees." I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, but direction, like a compass snapping north. We drafted the reply together, line by line. Every sentence was deliberate, every clause airtight. Before I left, Caden looked at me. "You're doing the right thing, Celine, not because it's smart, though it is, but because it puts an end to the cycle. You don't owe them quiet." I thanked him, gathered my things, and stepped back into the cold wind of a world that was, somehow, clearer than it had been in years. On the way home, I stopped by a small cafe I hadn't visited in a while, one with wide windows, soft music, and scones that reminded me of the mountains. While waiting for my tea, I noticed a girl, barely out of her 20s, sitting near the window, face flushed and eyes red. She was on the phone, voice trembling just loud enough to carry. "He said I'm nothing without him, that if it weren't for him I wouldn't have made it through school." She wiped her face and added, "He said he built me." I felt that line ripple through my chest like a fault line snapping. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even look too long. But when I got to my car and closed the door behind me, I sat in silence. I reached for my keys. There it was again, the tag. That old piece of metal that used to say something warm, familiar, for family. But today it didn't mean the same thing. Today it meant leverage, it meant control. It meant I'd handed something sacred to people who thought loyalty was something you could bend into profit. So I turned the key in my palm, let it press into my skin, and whispered to no one in particular, "Not anymore." They wanted me silent, small, and scared, but all they really did was make me very, very clear. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, like it knew something was coming. I had just poured a cup of tea and was settling into the couch when my phone buzzed with a text from David, the property manager. It was short, no punctuation, just like him. "Check this out. Thought you'd want to see it before I deleted anything from the cabin's cloud." A video file followed. I turned the volume up and hit play. The camera feed was grainy, black and white, captured by the security camera I'd had installed in the barn next to the cabin. I hadn't checked those files yet. It was always a backup angle, often overlooked. But this was gold. Callista and Jet were standing in the center of the cabin's great room, giving a tour like realtors. A couple, probably in their 30s, stood across from them nodding politely. "Yeah, we just say it's our family's place," Callista was saying with a shrug. "No one checks and it's technically true, right?" Jet laughed, loud and smug. "If Selene ever finds out, she'll lose her damn mind. But hey, what's she gonna do, sue her own family?" The woman chuckled nervously. The man asked, "And you're sure she's okay with us being here?" Callista waved it off like she was brushing away lint. "We handle everything. She's not involved." I paused the video, stared at the frozen frame. They had no idea the camera existed. They never thought anyone would look. That's the thing about people like them. They count on your silence to keep their secrets hidden. And I had just found my voice. I pulled into my parents' driveway just after 6. The air was heavy, the sky a dull gray that made everything look washed out. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Her face was thinner than usual, worn. She gave me a hopeful, tired smile. "We made pot roast," she said, like food could undo court filings and betrayal. "I'm not here for dinner," I said softly. My father was sitting in his recliner, TV muted. His eyes were red. "We were just wondering," Mom started, twisting her hands. "Is there any way to fix this? Just some way we can put it back?" I nodded. "Sure, but not until you stop pretending they're worth protecting." She froze. I pulled out my phone, opened the file, and tapped play. The room fell silent as the video played, Callista's voice, smug and casual, echoing through the living room like a hammer. My father leaned forward. My mother's lips parted in disbelief. When Jet's voice joked about suing me, Dad flinched. When Callista called the cabin hers, Mom let out a soft, shattered sob. "We didn't know," she whispered. I looked at her, not cruelly, but directly. "You knew enough. You just didn't want to deal with it." The phone went back into my bag. That was all they needed to see. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here for truth. And truth has teeth." Dad finally spoke. "What happens now?" I stood straighter. "The charges stand. The settlement terms don't change. They can agree. Or we go to court." "And us?" Mom's voice was barely above a breath. I exhaled. "I'm not shutting you out, but I'm not shielding you anymore either." I turned toward the door, then paused. "You taught me to be the bigger person, but being bigger doesn't mean being quieter. It means standing firm, especially when it's your own blood crossing the line." And just like that, I walked out, not angry, not broken, clear. Back home, I sat by the window as the first hints of dusk settled in. The house was quiet again, but not like earlier. This time it was peace, not because everything was okay, but because finally I was. The courthouse was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Even the usual shuffle of boots across tile or the low murmur of coffee-deprived lawyers in the hallway felt like background static to something deeper. An ending, maybe. Or the kind of beginning that requires a scar to form first. I arrived early, sat with my lawyer in a beige hallway under fluorescent lights that buzzed just loud enough to make you notice them. Callista and Jet showed up first. She wore a tailored coat and oversized sunglasses, like that could shield her from truth. Jet kept his jaw tight, tapping something out on his phone as though the world was watching him be mature. Narina and her husband followed, quieter, less smug, but not sorry. None of them looked sorry. Not really. The hearing didn't take long, just formalizing what had already been laid out, signatures on paper, civil agreements enforced with legal weight. They agreed to everything. full repayment for the property damage, legal fees, a permanent no-contact order, forfeiture of any and all future access to the cabin. No one said a word during the signing. Pens scratched quietly across thick legal pages. My lawyer passed documents across the table like a quiet dealer in a game no one wanted to admit they'd already lost. Just before handing back the last page, Callista leaned in, not quite whispering. "You were never meant to have more than us." It wasn't a confession. It was a curse. Or maybe the last breath of an old lie. I met her eyes. My voice was low, measured. "Then you shouldn't have handed me the proof you never deserved it." Jet scoffed under his breath, but he didn't say a word. Not with a judge behind a door just 20 feet away. The documents were stamped. The agreement was binding, and just like that, it was over. Legally, at least. That evening, I sat on my front porch with a wool blanket wrapped around my legs and a steaming mug of chamomile in my hands. I'd been carrying this weight so long it had its own pulse. But now, it was starting to fade. I brought out a small journal, one I hadn't touched in months, and wrote a letter I never intended to send. It began the way all unsent letters do. Honestly. Mom. Dad. I know you thought keeping things quiet would protect us, but silence doesn't preserve peace. It buries rot. I've been digging through what's grown in that silence for years, and I won't pretend it didn't cut me just because it didn't cut you. I forgive you, not because it was okay, but because I'm done carrying around the pieces of a family that asked me to stay small so they could feel big. You taught me to share, but no one ever told me how to protect what's mine when the ones taking it were the people I was supposed to love most. So I'm learning now. Late is still on time. I closed the journal and tucked it into the drawer of the side table next to me. The next morning, I drove up to the cabin alone. The roads were clear, but the air carried that brittle, late autumn sharpness, bare trees against a sky the color of old paper, the kind of morning that tells you winter's coming whether you're ready or not. The porch boards creaked just the same as they always had, familiar, steady. I sat on the deck, bundled in my coat, and held the original cabin key in my palm, the one my mother had engraved 5 years ago. For family. 3 simple words, heavy with a promise no one kept. I'd held on to it all this time, not because I believed in what it said, but because I didn't want to admit what it really meant, that family can break you, too. I took a small box from my bag, lined with velvet, clean and soft. I wrapped the key in an old dishcloth from the cabin, something my grandmother once used when we made cornbread together in that kitchen. I placed the wrapped key inside, closed the lid. On the top, I'd written one word in thick, permanent ink. Retired, because some legacies aren't worth passing down. As I sat back, my phone buzzed. This time, not a security alert. Just a text from David, the property manager. "Camera caught something this morning. Thought you'd want to see." Attached was a photo. Deer. 3 of them, standing quietly in the front yard just before dawn. Mist curling around their ankles. Peaceful. Untouched. I smiled. The cabin was finally what I'd always wanted it to be. Mine. Not because of a deed or a signature or even a settlement, but because I finally stopped asking for permission to claim what I'd built with my own hands, and because the last gate I closed was the one inside me.